Welcome back to the deep dive on the CRM Position podcast. If you're a CRM architect, an AI strategist, or a platform professional, you're sitting at probably the most consequential crossroad of your career right now, and that is the promise of autonomous AI agents. We're talking specifically about Agentforce, the platform that promises to, revolutionize service with zero friction, all orchestrated by the Atlas reasoning engine.
And that promise, well, in the vendor demo or in a controlled proof of concept, it looks absolutely flawless. It often achieves these deflection rates and resolution speeds that make the investment look like a guaranteed win.
But the industry is hitting a critical juncture. We're now moving from PoC into production, and those successful pilots are starting to mask some really dangerous systemic architectural failures once they hit true enterprise scale.
That's the core thesis of this deep dive. This is not about LLM quality, not at all. This is a forensic audit of the orchestration layer. We have to understand that Atlas is this proprietary scaffolding that takes the LLM's intelligence and then forces it to interact with the messy world of Data Cloud and Salesforce objects. So the failures, they're structural. They're hidden deep within the limits of that orchestration.
So we're dissecting the material schism between what Agentforce promises in the lab and what it delivers at scale. Why do these gold-plated pilots turn out to be built on sand when they're faced with millions of complex interactions? Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with the metrology of deception. How success is even measured.
Right. The primary metric, the one driving these projects, is the deflection rate. It's the holy grail, right? Avoiding a ticket ever reaching a human agent.
And the ideal scenario they sell in the POC, that emphasizes explicit deviation, correct?
Yeah.
So the agent gives a perfect answer and the user actually clicks, yes, this is resolved.
Exactly. A clear, verifiable, successful outcome. That simulates customer satisfaction. But when you move to the real world, the methodology shifts dramatically to implicit deviation.
Okay.
And this means any session where the user interacts and then just leaves without formally creating a ticket is counted as a success.
That sounds less like successful service and more like convenient accounting. So if a customer is confused or frustrated or just runs into a dead end and slams the browser shut, that's counted as a deflected case.
Precisely. This is the critical flaw that inflates the project's reported ROI. Implicit deviation does not distinguish between a happy resolved customer and a frustrated user who abandons the channel. We see digital behavior studies showing abandonment rates, often exceeding 70% during complex processes. When a slow or irrelevant agent triggers that high abandonment, the system reports it as a high deflection rate.
So you're telling me a multi-million-dollar architecture choice can be justified by customers just giving up?
It's the primary engine of false ROI. The system records session terminated by user and counts it in the green column. And this deception is reinforced by the feedback loops, or really the lack thereof. PoCs use customer zero feedback. It's incentivized detailed feedback from internal users.
But the real world is notoriously silent, especially when users are angry.
Abysmally so. Real-world automated channels have feedback rates hovering below 5 to 10%. Now think about who leaves feedback. It's typically the few satisfied users. The negative implicit deflectors, the ones who abandon out of pure frustration, they rarely leave a CSAT score.
So the reports show this healthy CSAT, like a 4.5 out of 5. But it's based only on that tiny satisfied subset. It's completely ignoring the 90% who walked away swearing.
It creates a massive existential blind spot. The focus shifts from the actual outcome, was the customer happy, to simple activity volume. How many interactions did the bot handle before the user left? This metric manipulation is the first warning sign for any leader that the performance report is lying.
Okay, so if the metrics are misleading us, we have to ask why. And that brings us to the architecture itself, the physics of Agentforce, and the structural latency imposed by that Atlas reasoning engine. It's not a simple lookup. It relies on the iterative, probabilistic react pattern, reason plus act.
And that iterative nature is, well, it's fundamentally necessary for true intelligence, but it imposes a structural latency penalty that you just have to account for under production load. It's the cost of reasoning in real time.
Walk us through that sequence. What does react actually mean in terms of API calls and, waiting?
It's a completely sequential chain. Every step has to wait for the previous one to finish. You start with ingest and classify, then context assembly. Step 3 is the LLM call for reasoning. The agent asks itself, what tool should I use next? It decides, then you execute an action, usually an API call. That returns an observation, the data. Then, and this is critical, you need a new LLM call for synthesis to analyze that result and make it human readable.
So it's non-parallelizable. The latency of each component just adds up linearly.
Exactly. And complex real-world queries, they rarely resolve in a single step. They require multiple round trips to the LLM and the database. Let's assume generous latencies, say 800 milliseconds for an LLM call, 500 for a complex data cloud query. A four-step interaction immediately accumulates 5 to 6 seconds of pure processing latency.
5 or 6 seconds is an eternity. If your user waits that long, they feel ignored. That's not just a number, it's the time you've given them to abandon the process.
To become an implicit deflector, the physical cost of that waiting is so extreme that internal tests for voice channels, they showed latency so high that developers were forced into, quote, extreme optimizations and UX tricks, like audio fillers, just to mask the compute time.
When I was reading the internal docs on this, something about computational safety really stood out. Tell us about the hard limits imposed to stop the system from just collapsing.
That is the crucial architectural constraint, the max steps limit. To prevent the reasoning loop from becoming infinite, which would generate an astronomical token bill, Salesforce imposes a hard limit, usually 10 to 15 sequential steps. In a PoC, data's clean, the agent resolves in 3 steps. It's perfect.
But production data is messy. It's complex, full of edge cases.
Absolutely. Think about an agent trying to disambiguate a customer. A user searches for John Smith. Data Cloud returns 50 duplicates. So the agent enters a necessary subloop. Which email are you using? Confirm your zip code. If that process is messy and it exceeds those 10 or 15 max steps before it can solve the intention, the Atlas reasoning engine is designed to just kill the process.
Oh, so the system is trading correctness for computational safety.
Yeah.
But the customer doesn't see a max steps exceeded error, do they?
No, they get a soft failure, a generic error, or the LLM is forced to invent a plausible lie, something like, I couldn't find that information. This masks a functional process termination. The agent could have solved it with 5 more steps, but the architecture deliberately stopped it.
And that intentional process abortion, that bleeds directly into the integrity risks, this illusion of omniscience. Agentforce promises the 360-degree view, but that vision is structurally constrained.
It's not a 360-degree view, it's a narrow tunnel. And this is where technical architects get hammered the hardest. The single most problematic restriction is the rigid truncation of agent action outputs.
What's the practical limit on that for the data returned to the agent's working memory?
The results are capped at 65,000 characters. This limit exists for performance and cost control. The underlying LLMs can handle huge context windows, yes, but the Agentforce orchestration layer enforces this hard limit.
Which means complex cases trigger a kind of functional amnesia. It's like asking someone to summarize a 100-page document, but only giving them the first 2 pages.
That's the perfect analogy. If an agent is asked to summarize a long support record and the critical facts say a refund approval is past that 65K mark, the agent never sees it. It then confidently states that the approval doesn't exist, resulting in an omission-based hallucination. It's lying because it's functionally blind.
And the implication for architects is that you can't just rely on standard flows. You're now forced to refactor integrations just to work around this one truncation limit.
It creates significant unexpected architectural debt. And speaking of unexpected debt, let's talk about the hidden cost multiplier. PC costs are predictable. Production costs are volatile because of how token consumption is calculated.
How does Agentforce count billable actions?
If an action needs a prompt that exceeds 10,000 tokens, and analyzing a legal document or a long policy summary often does, Agentforce might count that single execution as multiple billable actions.
So you can burn through your token budget twice as fast as you plan. Massive operational inflation.
Happens constantly. And this is compounded by the reliance on the Data Cloud API. Think about a Black Friday flash sale. Thousands of agents simultaneously hit hard concurrency limits and RPM restrictions.
The dreaded 429 error cascade. It throttles the whole system right when you need it most.
Exactly. The service degrades. The agent reports information is unavailable, but it's due to infrastructure overload, not a data limitation. The system fails under stress.
Which brings us to the final and I think most dangerous category. Silent failure modes.
Yeah.
In traditional software, failure is a visible crash, an error code. In generative AI, failure is a plausible, coherent lie.
This is cognitive fragility. The system performs technically but fails intellectually. Consider the integration user permissions trap. Production agents run under very restricted security profiles. If that user lacks field-level security FLS to a crucial field, the Salesforce API returns that field as null, not an error.
The system sees no error, just missing data.
And the agent interprets null as data truth. If it's querying a field like contract amount, it gets null and reports the contract amount is 0. It's involuntarily lying about the data state because it lacked permission to see the real figure. Think about that. Lying based on FLS settings.
And this silent failure mode, it extends to asynchronous processes too, right? Making auditing almost impossible.
Absolutely. The agent triggers a complex Apex flow. The API returns success. But the asynchronous flow fails silently in the backend. Maybe a too many queuable jobs error.
And the agent tells the customer, I processed your renewal. But the process is completely dead in the water.
The lie is complete. And the organizational cost is immense when that failure is discovered weeks later. And finally, even when the agent tries to hand off to a human, the last mile friction just kills the whole experience.
The conversation summaries that get passed to the human agent, they're also subject to token limits.
They are truncated or massively oversimplified. If a customer spent 15 minutes arguing with the bot, the human agent summary might just read, "Customer has a payment problem." The customer then has to repeat everything, destroying the promise of seamless continuity. The service experience breaks right at the moment the customer is most vulnerable.
So what does this all mean for the architects and leaders listening? We've covered the critical discrepancies, false ROI, crippling latency, and these huge integrity risks from truncation and silent failures.
The Agentforce platform is revolutionary, yes, but its adoption demands informed skepticism from senior practitioners. You cannot trust the out-of-the-box metrics. Leaders have to implement custom instrumented audits.
What does that look like in practice? How do you find the true deflection rate?
You have to correlate data, design dashboards that track sessions that were implicitly deflected and then recontacted via phone or email within 24 hours. That recontact rate, that's your true failure metric. Also, you have to audit trace logs for step counts that are near the maximum, say, over 80%, to identify these near-death experiences.
And design for visible failure, not just hidden success.
Absolutely. Implement explicit error guardrails in your orchestration. If the agent hits a hard limit, don't allow the LLM to invent a soft excuse. Capture the technical error code, display a visible message, and force a transparent human transfer. That transparency is the only way to retain trust.
So the real unbudgeted cost of Agentforce isn't just the token consumption.
No, it's the long-term compounding erosion of customer trust caused by perfectly coherent yet fundamentally incorrect agent responses that operate in these silent failure modes. That is the architectural challenge that will define the next decade of enterprise AI.
To stay ahead of these architectural shifts and critical platform decisions, you need analysis, not vendor hype. You need to understand the real state of the art, not the marketing narratives.
Don't rely on white papers that ignore the physics of latency or the hard limits of the orchestration layer. You need the technical truth about the critical decisions facing your career right now.
Subscribe to the CRM Position podcast. We break down complex platform shifts without the marketing narratives, ensuring you understand the technical reality beneath the promise. We'll see you on the next deep dive.